Some mornings begin like any other, but sometimes, in the middle of a packed and silent train, something breaks the silence. A word, a punch, a thoughtless act. And then a man in a cowboy hat steps out from the shadows. Not loud, not angry, but unwilling to let wrongs pass as if they were nothing. Today was one of those mornings. A woman was humiliated in front of a crowd. No one stepped in, but her husband did. And his name is Chuck Norris. The subway screeched like metal biting into metal, a piercing sound slicing through the cramped space. Monday morning, rush hour. Everyone stood shoulder to shoulder, backs stiff, eyes down, earbuds buried deep, as if not seeing, not hearing, meant nothing was happening. The scent of stale coffee, rain-soaked coats, and rust from the subway ceiling blended into a heavy, indescribable air. Near the door, a middle-aged woman stood silently. Not remarkably pretty, not weak enough to pity. She was just quiet. Lighty curled hair, a neat business coat, and a faded canvas tote clutched to her chest like a final layer of defense. Inside the bag were simple things: a cup of yogurt, whole grain bread, and a few apples still dewy from the morning market. An ordinary morning, filled with very small things. But she held it as if guarding a rare piece of kindness in this cold world. In front of her sat a young man, legs spread wide. Dyed blonde hair and wore sunglasses covering half his face despite the enclosed space. One leg was propped up on the seat next to him. The seat she would have taken had someone had the decency to offer it. She didn't complain, just asked gently, her voice no louder than a breath. "Excuse me, may I sit here?" He didn't turn, just smirked, speaking loud enough for 3 people nearby to hear. "Late? Tough luck, this ain't a doctor's waiting room." She pressed her lips together. No argument, no reaction, just clutched her bag tighter, her gaze fixed on the space before her, the space no one offered, and no one filled with decency. 3 people nearby, a man adjusting his glasses, a college student with headphones, a young boy, all quietly looked away. The train kept moving, but justice stood still. And in that moment, among the silent, lonely crowd, something began to crack. Subtle, but irreversible. The train curved sharply. A sudden tilt, just enough to make the unsteady stumble. She flinched, instinctively reaching for the metal pole beside her. Her shoulder lightly brushed the young man's arm, a mere touch. But he sprang up as if offended, exaggerating his disgust like she'd done something terrible. "Ever heard of personal space? You're too old to be this clueless." The words hit her like a slap. Right there in front of a packed train car. A few heads turned, but they turned away just as quickly. Her cheeks flushed. Not from shame. She knew she had nothing to be ashamed of, but she also knew no one would speak up for her. The young man raised his eyebrows, emboldened. He tilted his head, eyeing her canvas tote. "What's this? Apples and bread? You stocking up for the apocalypse?" He laughed. The air in the car began to shift. Not because of the train's motion, but because silence was no longer just a choice. It had become complicity. He reached out, not to hit, just to tap her tote strap like it was some kind of game. She stepped back half a pace. "Please don't. Relax, I'm joking. Why so tense?" He lifted the tote lightly with 2 fingers, then let it drop. 2 apples rolled out, tapping a nearby passenger's heel before continuing across the floor. She knelt down, quietly gathering each item. Her fingers trembled slightly. Her face bent low to hide any expression. He stood up, bringing his heel down on one of the apples. Crunch. Apple juice oozed out, pale red. Everyone heard the squish, like a public display of dominance. No one intervened. No one asked if she was okay. And just as she remained crouched down in silence, a shadow at the far end of the car began to move. The punk was still chuckling when a subtle movement at the far end of the car caught the eyes of the most observant passengers. A man, radiating quiet from head to toe. A worn cowboy hat, a weathered leather jacket creased by time, silver-flecked stubble, one hand resting loosely on the nearby rail. He wasn't staring at a phone. No earbuds, no disguise of expression. He had seen it all, from the beginning. And now he started to walk. Not fast, not urgent, not forcing anyone aside. Each step carried weight, like a ticking clock echoing inside the mind of the guilty. The woman had gathered the last unbruised apple and stood up, turning her face away to hide what she felt. Then a voice rose, not loud but firm. You dropped her things. Pick them up. The punk turned sharply. What? The apple apologized to her. He scanned the man from head to toe. What is this? A Western movie? Who are you, John Wayne? But the man didn't smile. He spoke slowly, clearly. I'm her husband. And with just those 3 words, the entire train car froze. The punk straightened up, puffing out his chest. Oh, yeah. So what are you going to do? Call the cops? Chuck didn't answer. She was hurt. You caused it. You know what to do. The punk glanced around, hoping for support. But this time, the crowd wasn't looking down anymore. Phones began to rise, not to interfere, but to record. Another man, bigger, wearing a bomber jacket, stepped forward, trying to regain control for their group. What's the problem here? You looking for trouble, old man? Chuck tilted his head slightly, eyes unwavering. Number. But if you insist, I'll end this quickly. The first guy still tried to act confident. I'm not apologizing. She's a grown woman. She can stand up for herself. Chuck spoke lightly, like a breeze brushing the back of one's neck. And I'm the voice that tells her she doesn't have to. The entire train car began to understand. Silence no longer belonged to the bullies. The air in the subway car thickened, like fog that refused to lift. The main punk's shoulders slouched just slightly, hesitating. One more taunt, he thought, and the old guy would back off. He bent down, picked up the last apple with 2 fingers, raised it as if offering mercy, then let it drop. The apple rolled under the seats. The yogurt cup followed, hitting metal and bursting. A splash of white shot out, like blood. Chuck watched. No anger, just silence. You got a mother? He asked. That question, so simple yet sharp, made the train hold its breath. The punk stammered. What does that have to do with anything? Chuck leaned slightly, his voice colder than the air conditioning. Then you should know. This is where it stops. But then another man, who'd sat silent at the far end the whole time, stood up. Hood pulled tight. In his hand, a solid plastic baton. No words, no expression. He just charged. The first blow landed with a sound like a hammer hitting a hollow drum. The baton struck Chuck's head. He collapsed, heavy body hitting metal. Blood trickled from his temple. The train car erupted. Screams, phones dropped, panic exploding into motion. The woman rushed to him, kneeling beside her husband. Charles, Charles, wake up. No one was laughing now. No one dared move. A finger twitched. Then a hand pressed against the floor of the train. Then one knee bent beneath him. Chuck slowly rose. The blood still trickled. But his eyes opened, not wild, not angry, but clear, focused. The eyes of a man who's been knocked down before and always knew how to rise. The man with the baton froze. He lifted his weapon again. But Chuck had already stepped in too close for it to matter. Chuck's left hand caught the attacker's wrist in midair, paused like a frozen movie frame. Then, with a turn of the hip and a drop of the shoulder, he flipped the man effortlessly. The attacker crashed onto the floor as if gravity had changed its mind. The train car gasped. Another thug charged, bull-like, roaring. Chuck sidestepped, just a half step, and the man face-planted into the seat with nobody touching him. A third raised his hand to try something, anything. Chuck didn't hit him. He simply stepped forward once, and that look in his eyes did the rest. 3 men lay groaning on the floor. One still stood, but pressed against the train door, hands raised. Not in surrender, but because he didn't know what else to do. Chuck didn't scan the crowd. He didn't flex, didn't boast. He simply bent down and picked up the torn canvas tote. Inside, there was just one bruised apple left and a broken half of whole grain bread. He walked to his wife, quietly handing the bag back. Her hands trembled as she took it, but she didn't lower her head. She simply nodded, silently, because she knew what had just been defended. Not the apple, but silence, kindness, and dignity. Chuck turned back toward the lead punk. He said nothing, just took one more step forward. That was enough. The punk spun around and slammed his hand against the control panel. "Open the doors! I want off!" But the train was still deep in the tunnel. Doors locked. No escape. Chuck didn't chase. He didn't push. He didn't throw another punch. He just stood there, silent, like a mountain, unchanging yet powerful enough to alter the flow of rivers. A young boy whispered, "Mom, was that Chuck Norris?" The mother didn't answer right away. She looked at the man still standing there, dried blood on his temple, arm gently around his small wife. She nodded, and the boy asked nothing more. Someone else murmured, "He never hit first," and he didn't say much, because he didn't need to. The train kept moving, but no one heard the engine anymore. All they heard was heartbeats. The train stopped. Next stop, Lexington and 63rd. Chuck turned to his wife. "You okay?" "I'm okay." He helped her up with his left hand, still holding the torn canvas bag in his right. They stepped off the train. No one blocked their way. The crowd parted. not out of fear, but because they had just witnessed something right rise to its feet. No one clapped. No one live-streamed anymore. Phones were lowered. For the first time, people stopped recording and started thinking. They climbed the subway stairs. City light poured over them. Warm, ordinary, as if no one had just bled beneath the streets. Chuck pulled a crumpled receipt from his pocket, stained with a smear of dried blood. Still want to get apples? Only if they're ripe. They're always ripe. They turned into a small shop at the corner. No one outside knew what had happened. No one recognized them. But for the ones who had been on that train, they would never forget. No medals handed out. No one asked for an autograph. There was only one man wiping dried blood from his temple, helping his small wife off the train, as if it was just another part of their life. But to those who witnessed it, that was the day they learned that courage doesn't need noise. And sometimes, standing still is the strongest move of all. You might forget the screams. You might forget the blows. But you'll never forget the look in Chuck Norris's eyes when he said, "I'm her husband." And if you think this story deserves to be shared, then share it. Not for the video, but because this world still needs people who know what's right and dare to act. If you ever thought the age of heroes was over, take a closer look at this story. Because some people don't need capes, they just know when it's time to stand up.